Good morning. So this one's for you, Justin. So thoughts on the Freedom Convoy. Well, there's a couple ways you can slice this, right? I mean, my immediate gut reaction is I appreciate what they're trying to do. I'm not a fan of mandates, even though I think the vaccine and non-pharmaceutical interventions are valuable to varying degrees. And I won't get into a whole lot just on the pandemic stuff, but generally speaking, I'm big on consent. And it's not consent if the state is coercing you into doing something you don't want to do. So I appreciate what they're trying to do. So that said, when we talk about civil disobedience, right, and nonviolent protest, it comes in flavors, right? And you can have the fiery but mostly peaceful protests of 2020, and you can have, sit-ins and people, occupying buildings in a, peaceful and nonviolent way. I haven't watched the story super closely, but I know there's kind of some rumor and innuendo about, disturbances or fights or, arson and stuff that maybe was false flags. I don't know. But overwhelmingly, the protest seems like a peaceful occupation protest. And so I can appreciate it in that respect, and that there's not, just these horrific scenes of arson and people getting curb stomped on the regular. However, so when people engage in civil disobedience, I mean, the term civil disobedience kind of inherently includes violations of the law. And so I can't condone people breaking the law. And granted, I'm not from Canada. I don't know what their specific regulations are there, but I do know what they are in Oregon. And so, generally speaking, I mean, you're committing something, in the neighborhood of disorderly conduct if you're intentionally obstructing traffic, right? And then if you're doing disorderly conduct with 5 or more people, then you're kind of wandering into the territory of riot. And that's really all the riot statutes requires: disorderly conduct plus more people. And riot's a felony charge in Oregon. Now, since 2020, the way the riot statute's been prosecuted, at least in Multnomah County, has been pretty lax, right? And you've got to be doing something more than just discon plus 5 or more people to actually be prosecuted on a riot charge. However, the letter of the law in Oregon, if someone was doing a kind of, trucker protest, then they would be committing, a Class C felony, I think it is. So here's the thing about nonviolent civil disobedience. There has to be an avenue for people to express their displeasure with their government, and there's a lot of ways that protests can operate, and marches, I think, are actually a really good avenue for that. And their marches are transitory, right? They do disrupt things, they get attention, it helps people amplify their voice, whereas the occupation and gridlock created by the trucker protest, I mean, it is incurring a substantial amount of monetary damage, and that's not something you can just gloss over. And so people who are being affected by it, their perspective on this needs to be heard as well, because if traffic's being locked down, if businesses are suffering, if people are losing their jobs, then a lot of, not all of, but a lot of the same problems I have with that I had with the BLM protests in 2020. So, and I mean, people want to say, stuff's covered by insurance and it's only money and all. I don't accept that argument. I mean, you are significantly impacting people's lives in a way that, if you did it individually as opposed to in a large, unmanageable group, you would be liable for significant damages. And so, again, I can't condone it, but I can understand it and I can appreciate the manner that it's being conducted. And generally speaking, civil disobedience, like I said, it kind of infers this violation of the law by definition. And if you are willing to face arrest, even for a felony charge, based on principle, my hat's off to you. I can respect your commitment to your cause. Again, I can't condone people violating the law, and I never would encourage people to do that, but I can understand and respect the thought process that says, no, this is morally unacceptable to me, what's going on, and so I'm going to put my liberty on the line to try and protect something or fight against something that I think is unjust. And so I can understand and respect it in that regard. And that goes for the, again, nonviolent civil disobedience that occurred in 2020. A lot of which was, I think, valid forms of protest. Just the bigger difference here, again, there were significantly fewer murders and, violent assaults, and, just the amount of arson is, not comparable, right? I mean, I haven't seen footage of, massive buildings just going up in fiery infernos, right? Now, all that said, what really grates on me about the whole situation with the Freedom Convoy is not how the protest is being conducted, but the difference in the reaction from government generally. Because, again, this is occurring primarily in Canada, not in the U.S. But if we're to compare kind of just generally the two, government allowed and enabled the BLM protests for months and months and months. And the individuals that did engage in violent activity were unacceptably let off the hook for just, over-the-top behavior. Again, largely involving arson. I mean, people were burned to death. And people died as a direct result of the 2020 protests. That was allowed to happen in a way that we have not seen before, and state and local governments instructed law enforcement to stand down. Now in Canada, what we're hearing is people calling for, fuel to be seized, child welfare, child protective services being called in on protesters to remove their children, all levers of the state being actively manipulated to try and end this occupation protest, which is, that's really what it is, right? And it grates on me, right? That there seems to, and there were BLM protests worldwide, I'm sure including Canada, that were just, not dealt with in the same way. But again, my context is my recollection of 2020 and Portland and what was going on there. And it was longer, than the current occupation protest in Ottawa. It went for more than 100 days. I don't remember what the final count was. And even sporadically into 2021, up until the inauguration, I think, there were still the final sputterings of the ongoing riots in Portland. And so, yeah, that really grates on me, that there's this exercise of coercive force by the state to end the protest in a way that was not exercised previously. Again, in different country, they don't have the protections of the U.S. Constitution, but had the same tactics been used in the U.S., I don't think that would have been constitutional. I don't understand or have a good understanding of what constitutional law looks like in Canada, and how their civil rights are enshrined, how malleable that is compared to the Bill of Rights in the United States, which already, people can say it's Swiss cheese. But yeah, so if you are engaging in an occupation protest and you're blocking roads in Oregon, I already talked about what statutes would apply, and if you face arrest, fine, that's your choice, and you get lodged on, a misdemeanor charge for disorderly conduct or felony riot, and you go on about your business. And then, if the state can find tow truck drivers to remove your big rig from the road, fine. And, maybe you do stack up a number of fines for however long your vehicle is sitting blocking the road. But ultimately, those are the enforcement options that should be available. And this kind of, use of the court injunction process to say, you can't be walking around on the street with, gas cans, and we're going to seize your fuel, and we're going to use child protective services, weaponize child protective services against protesters. Like, yeah, I'm not down with that. If your citizenry is ungovernable based on your policy, then the policy needs to be re-examined. And this notion by the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, that this is a, fringe minority. Obviously that's gaslighting the public. This is a mass movement, in as much as the BLM protests, which, really, there was a groundswell in 2020, and massive numbers of people came out. And if you've got that many working class folks saying what you're doing is unacceptable, and I'm going to throw myself upon the gears of the machinery and stop the machine until this changes, then government needs to be responsive to that and take a critical look at whether or not this policy is really in keeping with the spirit of elected, accountable government for and by the people, right? And again, it's a different country, but it's a Western democracy, right? Canada and the U.S. are cousins, and socially, culturally, politically. We're very, closely related to each other, and so you got to be careful about blurring the lines there. But there's overlap. That's my take on it. Let me know if you disagree. It's been fun. Gonna be out for a while. It's gonna be a while before I do another upload, but yeah, appreciate the engagement. Let me know what you think. Drop a comment below. See you next time.